You're listening to a CNA podcast. There are elections, then there are Indian elections.
Modi, Modi, Modi.
It's called the world's biggest exercise in democracy, and for good reason. Check out these numbers. There are nearly 1 billion eligible voters across 28 states and 8 union territories. And polling happens in 7 phases over 6 weeks. The finish line is just days away. I'm Teresa Tang. Correspondents Rebecca Bundhun in Mumbai and Ishan Garg in New Delhi join me to talk about what it's been like covering this marathon event. Rebecca, Ishan, hi.
Hello.
Hi.
You know, covering an election can be challenging enough, getting those sound bites, rushing to meet deadlines. And this year, things are a little bit different. A scorching heat wave in parts of the country, temperatures hovering around 40, 45 degrees Celsius in some places. Can you tell me, Rebecca, you first, how the heat factored into this assignment for you guys and also for the people in your story?
Yes, it really has been a massive factor. These elections taking place during some of the hottest weeks anyway, but this year it's been exceptionally hot and we've seen these really scorching temperatures. And certainly for us as journalists and having equipment and everything, we do have to prepare for this. We have to make sure, for example, that the equipment doesn't overheat. That just gives you a sense of how hot it is. We have noticed the camera overheating, so that means we need to take fans with us, even ice packs, ice coolers, ice boxes, just to keep stuff cool. It's that hot. And also for ourselves as well, make sure we carry plenty of water and everything, because we have, heard of people getting dehydrated, fainting during these elections. So we have to be careful as well. But certainly for the voters as well, we've noticed that it has taken a toll on them. And surprisingly as well, when we were out in Mumbai, for example, earlier this month covering those polls, we did notice that there wasn't really a lot of provisions there for the heat being taken. And there were people just out in the heat. Certainly some cases where there are old people or even disabled people sort of having to make their way to the polling booths and really kind of struggling a bit with that heat. We noticed as well that a lot of people really wanted to get out early in the morning to try to avoid some of the hotter temperatures that were there later in the day. But there are also reports that came through that this has been a factor in voter turnout. For example, in Mumbai, there were these reports that came through that said that there were some people that were turning up at the polling booths and finding that things were just taking so long, that it was so hot that they ended up just walking away without voting. So it has actually had an impact, it seems.
Equipment is certainly part of the problem. But if I were to talk about heat and it affects reporters personally, because you're out in the field, usually during the afternoons, you're trying to speak to people, get a sense of what's happening. The heat can be really brutal. And in some of the cities that we've been in, for example, in Amethi, Raebareli, these are in Uttar Pradesh, which is India's most populous state, there the temperatures were going up as high as 44 and 45 degrees.
Wow.
And often they can be very difficult to handle. You will see some preparations in a lot of polling booths. Now, most of the polling booths that we've been to have been in outskirts of areas, have been in villages, which is where 60% of India actually lives. So you will find there is some infrastructure. For example, there would be these mist fans, dessert coolers. So some steps have been taken to make sure that the people are not fainting in the heat, which has already happened. There have been reports of candidates who've been campaigning and out in the heat they've fainted, which also includes one of India's cabinet ministers, federal ministers, Nitin Gadkari, who fainted while campaigning and said that was because of the heat.
Okay, Rebecca, I'm trying to wrap my head around this election logistically. How does the Election Commission make this all happen? There are rural voters. I imagine a lot of security is required. And I'm guessing that polling is 44 days just because it's impossible to hold an election any faster than that.
That's exactly right. I mean, we're talking about an election where there are almost 1 billion voters. It's just staggering, really. And yes, getting our heads around those numbers is really, really difficult. But it's also a massive logistical challenge for the country. It's also extremely expensive. And the single day election just would not be possible in this kind of situation where you've got so many voters, such a massive country across the north, south, east, west, where you have to have all the staffing, the security, the electronic voting machines as well. You just can't do this in one day. Some of the smaller states, they are able to vote in one day, but other states like Uttar Pradesh, India's most populous state, also Maharashtra, where Mumbai is located, these states are just so huge that that's simply not possible.
Ishan, one of my fondest memories of my trip to India was drinking chai from, those small mud cups you see everywhere. I was in Kolkata and I had complete strangers just sit next to me and they started talking to me. And I know chai is also how you connected with people in Agra when you were there. Tell me, what did Indians talk about and how much tea did you drink?
Well, after the first half of the day, I really lost count of how many cups of tea I had had. But it's really interesting the way people sort of coalesce around these chai stalls and have conversations, which can range from anywhere about, say, bickering about their local political parties to having really deep, meaningful conversations about how the political system in India works. And one of the things that struck me during my few days in Agra is on one hand, you've got some voters who don't necessarily understand the issues they are voting for. They may not be aware of the finer points of the party's manifestos, but the wide majority of people, it amazes me how well informed they might be about what's happening in the elections, how, what the parties are saying, what the leaders are saying in the campaigns. They follow this stuff really, really closely. And one of the things that stands out about a chai stall is, of course, how well people are able to disagree with each other, and which was one of the points they made to me in these conversations. But the thing that stands out when you speak generally to voters across the country is what's interesting is that they're now seeing India's elections as more of a presidential form of elections. They're not necessarily thinking about these elections as the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, versus the India Alliance. They're thinking about it in terms of Prime Minister Narendra Modi versus who's the opposition party going to put up against him. And we found voters who were mostly impressed by what Prime Minister Modi has done, what he's said, and some of the key things that he's done in his 2 terms in office, be it the Ram Temple in Ayodhya or abrogating the special status of the state of Kashmir.
If you talk about election issues, Modi has become the primary election topic. Earlier, the BJP had the Ram Temple as their main issue. But now, Modi has become a bigger subject than the temple. That's why people want to vote for him.
Since the BJP came to power, issues have become irrelevant. If we say all the issues have gone away, that's not possible. But Modi has solved issues such as Kashmir. That was the biggest problem. We never thought Kashmir would truly become part of India, but it did. That was really big. He also made sure the Ram Temple was built.
What's also interesting is the fact that most of the achievements in their minds that they think have come from the government, they don't necessarily associate that with the Bharatiya Janata Party. They associate that with Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself. And this is one of the reasons why political analysts in India have said that the Prime Minister, who is incredibly popular, before the elections, his popularity ratings were somewhere between the high 70s to low 80%, has built this sort of cult of personality around him. And voters who are voting for BJP, most of them are actually voting for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 3rd term.
Rebecca, Prime Minister Modi and his BJP, they focused heavily on southern India during their campaign push. He traveled to Tamil Nadu at least 7 times, I believe, to inaugurate a variety of infrastructure projects and other initiatives. And you were deployed to Tamil Nadu as well. What is sentiment around Mr. Modi like there? Ishan was just saying how incredibly popular he is in the country.
It's really interesting because when you go to the south of the country, really Modi has much less sway. And now when you think of Indian politics, everybody thinks of Narendra Modi. And of course, he is this hugely popular figure. It's widely expected that he will win a 3rd term in these elections. But once you go to the south, he's really, really not that significant. In fact, in Tamil Nadu, for example, it's the DMK, which is a local regional party that's in power in the state. And its main rival is the AIA DMK. Those are the regional parties, and they are really powerful there. They're very significant to voters. However, the BJP has really been working very, very hard in terms of its campaigning in these elections to try to win over voters. In fact, even Modi's been using artificial intelligence to have his speeches translated into the Tamil language to try to appeal to voters. He's been doing his rallies there, these infrastructure projects and so on. And they've really been working hard on fielding this candidate, BJP President Annamalai, to try to win a seat in Coimbatore. So they have been working to try and increase their vote share. In fact, in the last election back in 2019, 2019, the BJP, the ruling party nationally, they in fact failed to win a single seat in the state of Tamil Nadu. That just gives you a sense of how sort of insignificant they've been there. But certainly Annamalai, who's campaigning hard, and he's become a big figure that everybody's talking about in Tamil Nadu from the BJP. A lot of people are sort of counting on him for the BJP to try to actually make some inroads in the south. Let's have a listen to what he has to say.
At this point of time, BJP Tamil Nadu needs me. And my job is to put my heart and soul and grow the party. Normally, is nobody without Modi ji. So we are messengers of Modi ji who carry Modi ji to the field and ground.
So what it will be interesting to see is whether this actually translates into seats for the BJP in Tamil Nadu. It's widely expected that they will increase their vote share, but how many seats will they win? Some analysts say that they may still fail to win a single seat there.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch. Also interesting is nearly 30% of candidates running for the BJP are actually defectors from other parties. So let's talk about the opposition now, Rebecca. More than 25 parties have formed a bloc. They're known as India. What has been the alliance's biggest challenge in this election?
Well, really, it has been a major struggle for the opposition, including the main opposition Congress party. And this is one of the reasons why all these parties have had to kind of club together, because just fending off fighting the BJP has been such a struggle. So they've tried to play on a number of issues, including what they're saying is that the BJP has been eroding democracy, for example. And, you know, they've talked about these cases where politicians, opposition politicians, journalists and so on have been, they say, targeted by the BJP. They've talked about erosion in these kind of rights in the country. So that's one of the main issues. And they've really been working very, very hard to try to appeal to voters. But really, they have been on the back foot, it seems. And with this opposition bloc, that's really kind of their attempt to try to do something. But a lot of people are saying that, you know, they don't really have a clear face as well. Like, for example, with Narendra Modi, you've got this big figure. And like Ishan was saying as well, it has become more of a presidential type election. But when it comes to the opposition, do you really have that figure? Let's have a listen to Shashi Tharoor, who's a candidate from the Indian National Congress Party.
We see ourselves as a country of great diversities united in a common nation. Whereas the BJP and its fellow travelers have a Hindi, Hindutva, Hindustan ideology, which reduces the soaring majesty of an inclusive faith like Hinduism into the intolerance of the British football hooligan.
In terms of issues, one of the voters you spoke to, Ishan, over chai, mentioned the Ram temple in Ayodhya, Uttar Pradesh. That site is the source of a political, historical, socio-religious debate in India. And Mr. Modi inaugurated the temple back in January of this year. Some observers are actually surprised that ordinary people haven't turned it into a political issue. Has the Ram temple card played out the way the BJP expected, or has it worked in the opposition's favor?
This is a very interesting subject, because when you actually speak to people and you ask them point blank if they're going to vote for the BJP because of the construction of this Ram temple, many people would say no. They would say that this is part of what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has delivered. But once you take the camera away, once you're speaking to people off the record, many will say that this sense of pride that comes with this idea that this Ram temple, which had been disputed for a very long time, has finally been built. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated it, participated in the consecration ceremony, is certainly a big part of the symbolism, the kind of undercurrents that run through the voters and influence their behaviors when they go out to vote. Now, when you speak to political analysts, they would say that it's obviously a big point for the Bharatiya Janata Party, because construction of the Ram temple has been one of the issues that's been consistent in their manifestos throughout the party's existence. So it's certainly a big issue for them. But what analysts also say that the fact that the opposition parties have sort of distanced themselves from the Ram temple, it remains to be seen if that's going to give them any real advantage when the results are out. But certainly in minds of the voters who don't want to see Indian politics being divided along communal lines, don't want to be divided along religious lines, people who think that the ideas of secularism are very important, for those voters, this certainly becomes an issue and might work in the favor of the opposition parties. But the BJP would say, the Prime Minister has said this himself in the interviews that he's given to Indian television channels. He said that when he was at the Ram Temple inaugurating, he wasn't there as the Prime Minister of the country. He said that he was invited by the temple committee. He went there in his personal capacity, but certainly in the minds of the voters, who they would certainly perceive this as an episode of Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivering this Ram Temple, which had been promised to them for decades.
Mm-hmm. I want to linger on the topic of religion for a moment, Ishan. Varanasi, it's India's spiritual capital, and it's also Prime Minister Modi's stronghold, right? So Mr. Modi, he has sort of become this Hindu-first leader. He's bringing politics into religion, or religion into politics, you could say. What are the views of how he has leaned into India's religious differences in this campaign?
Well, Varanasi is also my hometown.
Oh.
And a lot of people that I've spoken to in Varanasi, which includes family members and friends, they see Prime Minister Narendra Modi as a sort of figure who's delivered an immense amount of developmental work in this city. Now, there is certainly a message that goes out to the wider voters when Prime Minister Narendra Modi decides to contest from Varanasi, which is a strong Hindu bastion. It's one of the pilgrimage sites where millions of Hindus go to every single year. And analysts have said that this gives the message to the wider public that if he's accepted in the spiritual capital of Hinduism, he will be widely accepted among Hindus across the country. So there is certainly that sort of subliminal messaging there. But when you speak to people in Varanasi, especially if you speak to the minority communities, among the Muslims, there is a fair bit of divide. There are upper class, rich Muslims who've got big businesses. They seem to be happy with the Modi government. They say that this government is very business friendly. They have cut a lot of red tape. His reform policies have been very effective, and therefore that's why they would vote for the BJP. But when we speak to a lower income segment of the same community, many will say that their rights have been eroded in the same city that they live in. They're being treated as second-class citizens. So there's a bit of a divide in that city.
Another controversial point in this election has been over political funding, over electoral bonds, Rebecca. It has been described as the world's biggest corruption scam. What are these bonds, and what has been the fallout for the BJP?
So these are the electoral bonds that were introduced by the Narendra Modi government back in 2017. And the idea was that it would let individuals and companies make unlimited and anonymous donations to political parties. And the government said that this would actually be a way of cracking down on black money flows. But earlier this year, back in February, the Supreme Court actually said that this scheme was completely unconstitutional and the scheme ended up being scrapped. So this was actually seen as a setback for Narendra Modi's BJP because it had been the major beneficiary of this system, and this happened just weeks before these national elections. However, having said that, a lot of this money would have already been raised. So the party already has a huge amount of money from this system. So analysts say that it may not have a massive effect in particular on this general election. And we have to remember as well that it wasn't only the BJP that was the beneficiary of this system. It was other parties as well, the Congress, other parties too, have managed to raise a lot of money from these electoral bonds. But yeah, it's interesting to see that has been completely scrapped. And now going forwards, and in terms of the next election, for example, to look at the ways that parties will have to raise money, because this will not be an option anymore. And it's still a very controversial scheme, and people are still really discussing it as those sort of names have come to light and everything, the donors, and a lot of questions have been raised over the system.
And today, in modern India, women are leading us to a better future.
What you just heard there was Prime Minister Modi addressing a joint sitting of the U.S. Congress last year, and he mentions the group I want to talk about now. That is women. There are 500 million registered female voters, and they've been described as going from being homemakers to being kingmakers. And interestingly, Rebecca, the construction of a toilet in Uttar Pradesh became a huge rallying point for them. Can you tell us more?
Yes, well, under Narendra Modi, he has had this Clean India Swachh Bharat campaign. That's been one of his key initiatives, and building toilets has been a massive part of that. And earlier this year, they reached the 2 millionth toilet in Uttar Pradesh. This is seen as an area of huge progress because it's not just about sanitation, but it's also a safety issue as well when it comes to women. Now, if we look at this election, it does seem that women could be playing a much more significant role when it comes to voting. For example, there have been 15% more women than men that have actually enrolled to vote in this election. So, that suggests that they could be playing a bigger role. And certainly the parties as well have really been trying to appeal a lot to women. If we look at what Modi has done over the past few years as well, certainly he has been trying to focus on appealing to women, for example, with initiatives around maternity leave, cooking gas subsidies, also some cash handouts for poorer women. There have been those efforts. But at the same time, if we look at India, there's still very much that perception of it not being a very safe country for women, certainly in parts of the north as well. Also, if we look at the labour force participation of women, that's actually declined over the past few years. So that's another worrying factor. And the government is well aware, and economists say that if India is to achieve its real economic growth potential, it does need to have many more women participating in the workforce to really achieve that potential.
Yeah, we're expecting to get results in a little less than a week from now. And experts have mostly said, look, a Modi win, it's coming, like it or not. Ishan, before we go, what's public sentiment like with just days to go before we learn the outcome of this election?
Well, there's one conversation that's prevalent everywhere, be it news desks, be it chai stalls, or be it just living room conversations. Everywhere people are talking about how many seats is the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, going to win. Now, the party itself has made a huge push and said that they are going to win more than 400 seats in India's 543-member lower house of parliament, which would be a massive, massive victory. But the political analysts who have been watching these elections, they've got split opinions. Majority of the analysts, they are saying that, yes, of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to win. But if you look at the finer details of how the votes that have gone in his favor or the votes that have gone in favor of the opposition, if you look at that, you might find out once the results are counted that he might be losing some ground in northern India while picking up more seats in southern India and eastern India, which would be an interesting trend. Secondly, they've pointed out that for the opposition parties, especially the Congress party, which is the big federal level opposition party to the BJP, which won close to about 50 to 55 seats in the previous elections, analysts say that they can't dip any further. They've already sort of hit their rock bottom. So if they perform well, if they gain more seats, it will be coming out of the BJP's kitty. Now, these conversations are, of course, going on, and political analysts are still not saying how many seats BJP is going to win, but most of them widely expect Prime Minister Narendra Modi to win. And on June 4th, we will see the results being counted, which is a whole big, complicated process in itself. The vote counting starts right in the morning. These electronic voting machines, which have been kept in complete secrecy, properly logged down in the parliamentary constituencies where people have voted, they will be opened up in the morning, and in the presence of the candidates and the political representatives, as well as the officials from the Election Commission of India, the votes will be counted. By midday, we will start getting a sense of which parties are leading. And if the 2019 election results are anything to go by about 5 or 6 p.m. local time in India, we should have a sense of who's won it.
Exciting days to come. Guys, thank you so much for your continued coverage and also for sharing what it's been like out there over these past few weeks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
And a reminder that the TV episodes of CNA Correspondent air every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. Find coverage from all our correspondents on the CNA YouTube channel and on cna.asia. The team behind this week's episode is Rosalie Pute, Clara Ong, Crispina Robert, Craig Dale, and myself, Teresa Tang. Thanks for joining us.